Phlebotomy exam review. Guys, today I'm going to start in chapter 1, and I'm going to go through and just tell you the things that I feel are important and that you really need to focus on. It's a lot of content, guys. You've been learning this as you go, but just please make sure that you go back and you really pull together a good review. And if you have questions, let me know. In chapter 1, of course, I want you guys to know all of your key terms. You need to understand, chain of custody. You want to know what the aliquot is, all of your key terms. CLIA classifications, CLIA classifications. There's a box on page 3. Please make sure that you're familiar with all of those. And the accrediting agencies and what your role is as a phlebotomist when it comes to the CLIA classifications and the accrediting bodies. What roles do you have? What authority do you have? What do these guys do? What is their purpose? All of that is very important. The chain of infection. That's super important. You'll probably see questions regarding the chain of infection just because of the simple fact that, you run the risk of contaminating, and when you're taking somebody's blood that is invasive, you're actually going into that vein. So they want to know that you understand the risk associated with infection as part of that. Components of bloodborne pathogens. There's a box 1-4 on page 9. Make sure that you go over that. Anything that is in boxes is considered important, and we need to always think safety as well. And then we need to know our table 1 on page 6, our transmission-based precautions. That's very important. I'm sure you'll see questions regarding that. You'll see questions regarding that throughout phlebotomy, patient care tech, and all of your classes. Moving on to chapter 2. Again, I want you to know your key terms. The coagulation cascade. Guys, there's a chart on page 17 where it talks about the factor 7, factor 6, factor 4. I'm not really looking for that. I just want to know that you know the process of what happens with coagulation, what happens with healing. So don't get yourself so stumped up on that. Keep it simple, but know the important components of that, which would be knowing what venous blood is versus capillary blood, knowing what happens at the site of injury as far as at the time of injury you have the bleeding and then the body starts healing, and then you have the clumping of the platelets and then the healing process. But I'm not so much worried about the different factors with that. Equipment, you need to know your tubes. You need to know what the plasma separator tubes, you got the serum separator tubes, all of the different types of tubes. You need to know the different types of devices, know the breakdown of what you're dealing with as far as knowing what the bevel is on a needle, what's the point, what's the shaft, what's the hub, in our evacuated tube systems, the ingredients in those evacuated tube systems, knowing the syringe, and the butterfly needles, knowing what a blunt needle is and what do you do with that, the different transfer devices, your sharps container, how do you transport this blood to the lab. You're going to be given a biohazard bag. This must be labeled as biohazard. It must be treated as biohazard. Our biohazard containers. Color coding, this is a huge chapter in chapter 2, knowing your different color tubings, what you're collecting and how many times that you invert. The order of draw is huge. You're going to see questions related to the order of draw on your phlebotomy exam. So going through and knowing all of the different tables, the order of draw, what you're testing for, the different equipment selection, all of that, guys, is very, very important. Again, moving on to chapter 3. With chapter 3, we're talking about venipuncture technique. You need to know your key terms. You need to know what the exam requisition form is. I've showed you one in class that we complete, but also the exam requisition form includes your doctor's orders. These look different in each setting. So just knowing what is contained on that exam requisition form and what your expectations are with that is important. Again, think safety. We need to always be identifying this patient. We need to make sure that we have the correct patient, the correct orders, knowing the different techniques. How long can you apply a tourniquet? How long can it stay on? How do you apply the tourniquet? How do you tie the tourniquet? Vein selection on page 56. Knowing where the different arteries and veins are at is very important. Knowing where not to and where to stick. Knowing the risk associated with sticking. Labeling the tubes. How to bandage the patient's arm. Disposing of the equipment. All of that through chapter 3, again, is very important. And there's a breakdown. So go through chapter 3 thoroughly, please. Chapter 4 is the pre-examination variables, post-examination variables, basal state, the time labs, the effects of if you don't collect the blood at the correct time, if the doctor has an ordered lab, knowing what happens to these samples, like if they become hemolyzed, know what that term means and what that is. So go through this chapter really well. You really need to go through all of your chapters. Chapter 5, we talk more about the chain of custody, the different diurnal variations, how to clean the site, blood cultures. Blood cultures are very important. I did not have the blood culture tubes, but what I plan to do in lab on Wednesday is I'm going to pull some videos that I've found, and I'm going to walk you guys through exactly how to collect. The technique as far as sticking the patient is the same, but the cleaning technique is different. Remember, with blood cultures, we have to collect from 2 sites. We want to make sure that it's not contaminated. But I'm going to go over, I've got a video that I want to show you guys, so I'm going to go over that in detail. Again, knowing the different veins, when we're collecting, if we're collecting arterial blood gases, there's a special procedure that we have to do with that when they go into the artery. That starts on page 116 when it talks about the modified Allen test. And then it goes over to preparing the local anesthetic. And then it goes on over through the radial artery puncture. So I want you to know that. Know all of your tables in chapter 5. Know the different, how do you pack these labs? How do you send them down to the lab if they're to be protected, if they can't be exposed in light? You can put them in a darker biohazard bag. You may wrap them in tin foil. You can be creative there. Dermal puncture, again, is very important, knowing the difference in the type lances that you use as far as whether you're collecting a blood sugar or whether you're collecting a PTINR, which is to test to see how fast your blood is clotting. All of the tables in chapter 6, very important, so know those. Same with chapter 7 and same with chapter 8. Please make sure that you go through, you know, all of your tables, that you know all of your order of draws, that you know the ingredients, what tubes are collected and what, know the difference in a peripheral IV insertion versus a PICC line. I want you guys to read up on that. Know the different types of needles. I think that's it. You really need to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. You know, get into the detail, get into the safety, get into the order of draw, get into the ingredients, get into knowing what color tube you're going to need when you're given a lab order, what the different orders look like. Guys, you may Google and you may see, you may Google sample doctor's orders for blood collection. That will give you an idea of what the different orders look like and how they're going to be written. So please do that and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.